What if you lived during the Middle Ages? Imagine waking up one morning, stepping outside, and realizing that everything around you has changed. Not just the technology or the buildings, but the very fabric of society, the air you breathe, and the way people relate to one another. The buzzing hum of modern life is gone. Instead, you find yourself standing in a bustling medieval village, dirt streets packed with vendors selling wares, the distant clang of a blacksmith's hammer, the smell of wood smoke mixed with fresh bread. Towering stone castles loom on the horizon, and peasants, knights, and clergy populate this unfamiliar world. What if you were transported back, not just to a movie set or a historical reenactment, but truly living in the Middle Ages? This question is more than a flight of fancy. It invites us to explore a world shaped by different forces, political, cultural, and technological, and to understand what life was really like when the modern comforts we take for granted simply didn't exist. Imagine the paradox of living in a time often romanticized for its chivalry and mystery, yet marked by brutal hardship, constant danger, and a worldview dominated by superstition and rigid social hierarchies. In this imagined reality, the concept of time itself feels altered. Days are dictated by the rising and setting of the sun, and the year turns with the rhythm of planting and harvest, not with clocks or calendars on your phone. News travels on horseback or by word of mouth, and knowledge is guarded jealously by monks in monasteries or lords in their stone keeps. And yet, for all its distance from our modern world, the Middle Ages was a crucible that forged many of the institutions, ideas, and inventions that still influence us today. The feudal system, for all its inequality, established new forms of governance and loyalty. The rise of guilds planted the seeds of organized labor and craft specialization. Medieval universities, born out of cathedral schools, began the quest for knowledge that led to the Renaissance and beyond. But before we dive deeper into this world, imagine a day in your life in this era. You wake before dawn to tend to your tasks, perhaps as a serf tilling the land, a craftsman hammering away at your trade, or even a merchant trading goods between towns. Water comes from a well or stream, food is seasonal and simple, and medicine is a blend of herbal remedies and prayers. What strikes you most is the absence of what we now call modern conveniences. There's no electricity, no running water, no smartphones or cars. Your world is smaller and yet somehow more intertwined with nature and the cycles of life and death. This world, at once alien and foundational, challenges our understanding of progress and survival. It forces us to ask, how did people live, love, fight, and hope in a time so distant yet so critical in shaping humanity? And more provocatively, what if you had to live there, not as a tourist, but as someone born into the struggles and triumphs of the Middle Ages? As we embark on this journey through time, we'll unravel the mysteries and realities of medieval life. We'll examine the science, the social order, and the surprising innovations of an era often dismissed as dark or primitive. Along the way, we'll discover how the echoes of that world still resonate in ours. Step through this door and prepare to see history not as distant facts, but as a living, breathing world that once was, and what it might mean if you found yourself living in it. Before we can truly grasp what it means to live during the Middle Ages, it's essential to understand the world that shaped this era, the backdrop against which this vast chapter of human history unfolded. The Middle Ages, often broadly defined as the period between roughly 500 to 1500 CE, was neither uniform nor static. Instead, it was a complex, evolving mosaic of societies, ideas, and technologies transitioning between the ancient and the modern worlds. At the dawn of this period, the Western Roman Empire had just fallen, leaving a fragmented landscape across Europe. Without centralized imperial authority, power devolved into local rulers and feudal lords who controlled the land and its people. This fracturing birthed the feudal system, a hierarchical network of obligations, loyalties, and protections. Lords granted land to vassals in exchange for military service, while peasants or serfs worked the land under often harsh conditions. The economy was predominantly agrarian, with survival intimately tied to the soil, the seasons, and weather patterns. Science and technology were far from absent, but existed within different paradigms. Without the empirical methods and scientific revolution that would come centuries later, medieval understanding of nature was often entangled with religious belief and superstition. Yet this era was not without innovation. The heavy plow improved farming efficiency. The three-field crop rotation system allowed more reliable harvests, and watermills and windmills harnessed natural forces in ways previously unseen in Europe. In the social realm, the Catholic Church stood as a colossal institution, both spiritual and political. It dictated moral codes, education, and even law, wielding immense influence over kings and commoners alike. Monasteries served as centers of learning and literacy in an otherwise mostly illiterate society, preserving texts from antiquity and copying manuscripts by hand. The Church's worldview framed life as a temporary trial before eternal salvation or damnation, which permeated people's attitudes toward health, justice, and death. Culturally, medieval life was tightly bound to rituals and festivals aligned with the Christian calendar, from Christmas to saints' feast days. These events punctuated the rhythm of a year often marked by hardship and monotony. Artistic expressions ranged from Gothic cathedrals that reached toward the heavens to illuminated manuscripts filled with intricate designs and vibrant colors. Technologically, the Middle Ages were often misunderstood as stagnant. In reality, many tools and mechanical devices emerged or spread widely during this period. The spinning wheel revolutionized textile production, the compass expanded navigation, and improvements in metallurgy facilitated stronger armor and weapons. While these advancements were incremental compared to later scientific breakthroughs, they laid essential groundwork for the Renaissance and the eventual rise of modern science. Life expectancy in the Middle Ages was drastically shorter than today, often averaging around 30 to 40 years. Child mortality was high. Diseases like the plague ravaged populations, and medical knowledge was limited. Remedies blended herbal medicine with prayers and rituals, as the understanding of germs and anatomy remained primitive. Living conditions varied widely. A noble in a castle enjoyed relative safety and luxury, while a peasant's life was fraught with hard labor, famine, and vulnerability to violence. Communication and travel were slow and dangerous. Roads were poorly maintained, travel was primarily by foot or horseback, and news took weeks or months to spread. This isolation contributed to the regional diversity of customs, laws, and dialects. Yet, trade routes such as the Silk Road still connected parts of medieval Europe to Asia, Africa, and the Middle East, enabling an exchange of goods, ideas, and technologies. At the cusp of the later Middle Ages, around the 12th and the 13th centuries, Europe experienced what historians call a medieval renaissance, a resurgence of intellectual activity and cultural growth. Universities began to form in cities like Paris and Bologna, where scholars studied philosophy, law, and theology. The invention of the printing press in the 15th century, just beyond the medieval timeframe, would later revolutionize information dissemination. Understanding this complex tapestry is crucial before imagining how you might have lived in this time. Without modern conveniences, your daily life would be governed by different rules. Your health, your social standing, your very worldview would be shaped by these intertwined forces of nature, faith, and feudal order. The Middle Ages were neither simply dark nor backward. They were a dynamic period full of contradictions, innovations, and human struggles that echo into our world. This context sets the stage for imagining the extraordinary moment when something entirely new disrupts this medieval equilibrium, a moment that challenges all assumptions and forever changes the course of history. Now, imagine that in the midst of this medieval world, something extraordinary happens, a moment that shatters the familiar rhythm of life and challenges the very foundations of your understanding. One day, as you go about your daily tasks, the sky darkens unexpectedly. A strange, shimmering light appears overhead, unlike anything you've seen before. Whispers ripple through the village. Some claim it's a divine sign. Others suspect witchcraft or a curse. This event is the first contact with a phenomenon completely alien to the medieval mind. A sudden glimpse of advanced technology, perhaps an object that defies gravity, gleams with an otherworldly glow, or even a mysterious manuscript filled with knowledge far beyond your time. The arrival of such a breakthrough could be imagined as the sudden appearance of a mechanical device capable of printing books quickly, or a scientific treatise that hints at the workings of the stars and matter itself. The initial human reaction is a mixture of awe, fear, and confusion. People gather around the object or the messenger who brought this knowledge. The local lord might see this as a threat to his authority, while the clergy could interpret it as either a miraculous sign or a dangerous heresy. Common folk, meanwhile, might be torn between hope for salvation or dread of punishment. In a world dominated by superstition and religious doctrine, where unexplained phenomena were often attributed to angels or demons, this breakthrough would ignite intense debate. Scholars in monasteries might scramble to interpret the new information, trying to reconcile it with Scripture. Some would see it as an opportunity to advance understanding, while others would resist fiercely, fearing the loss of control. The societal ripple effects are immediate. Traders might see new potential for goods or ideas. Craftsmen wonder if their skills could be enhanced or replaced, and peasants question how this might affect their burdens. Even within families, generational divides could deepen as younger people embrace the strange new possibility while elders cling to tradition. This turning point is not just about a physical object or idea, but a profound cognitive leap. It challenges the medieval worldview, the belief in a fixed order ordained by God, where social roles and knowledge are immutable. Suddenly, there is a glimpse of change, progress, and perhaps a future unlike any known before. But this moment also exposes fault lines. The tension between innovation and tradition intensifies. The ruling classes might fear losing their grip, and religious leaders might launch campaigns to suppress heresy. The fear of the unknown leads to persecution, book burnings, or even violent conflicts. At the same time, pockets of enthusiasm arise. Some forward-thinking individuals begin to form groups dedicated to studying and spreading this knowledge. They become early scientists, inventors, or philosophers in a society still steeped in medieval norms. Universities could accelerate, crafts evolve, and slowly, a new intellectual movement might take shape. For you, living in this moment means navigating a world on the edge of transformation. Your daily life is disrupted by rumors, fear, and excitement. You may find yourself caught between skepticism and curiosity, between the safety of tradition and the promise of progress. This turning point is the fulcrum on which history could pivot. It illustrates how a single breakthrough, whether technological, intellectual, or cultural, can ripple through society, challenging existing power structures and reshaping human destiny. From this moment forward, the Middle Ages cease to be a closed chapter. Instead, they become a bridge, a place where ancient beliefs and modern ideas collide, creating tension, conflict, and ultimately, change. As this unprecedented event unfolds, it sets the stage for dramatic shifts in economic life, social structure, and the very way people see themselves and their world. The coming years will test humanity's capacity to adapt, resist, or embrace the unknown, determining the fate of medieval society and beyond. Following the unprecedented moment when the unknown appeared, medieval society begins to feel tremors of change. The initial shockwaves ripple through the economy, daily life, and social interactions, causing both excitement and disruption. The introduction of this strange new knowledge or technology doesn't immediately overthrow the old order, but it subtly reshapes it, forcing people to adapt in unexpected ways. Economically, the presence of a revolutionary idea or device sparks curiosity among merchants and craftsmen. The guilds, traditionally rigid and protective of their crafts, face a dilemma. Should they embrace the new methods that might improve productivity or reject them to preserve their authority and control? Some artisans experiment cautiously, integrating novel techniques, while others resist, fearing the loss of their livelihoods. In marketplaces, goods that once took months to produce or transport begin to change in availability or quality. Traders sense opportunity, hoping to capitalize on these new possibilities, and expanding networks beyond what was imaginable before. The exchange of goods and ideas gains momentum, slowly knitting together a more interconnected medieval economy. Daily life reflects both optimism and unease. Peasants and serfs, while burdened by their feudal obligations, hear rumors of potential relief through improved tools or agricultural methods. Yet many remain skeptical, wary of the unfamiliar and suspicious of change that could disrupt their fragile survival. For most, tradition is a safety net, and uncertainty breeds fear. Socially, the rigid class structure feels pressure. Nobles and clergy debate fiercely over how to handle this unknown force. The Church, seeing a potential threat to its spiritual monopoly, begins issuing warnings against heresy and blasphemy, attempting to control the narrative and limit the spread of disruptive knowledge. Meanwhile, some progressive clergy and scholars see an opportunity to expand learning and question old dogmas. Education begins to stir. Cathedral schools and early universities attract more students eager to explore new ideas. Literacy rates slowly rise among the emerging middle class. Manuscripts containing the strange knowledge are copied and circulated in secret, sometimes hidden from the eyes of authorities. This underground exchange of information creates a parallel intellectual world where curiosity thrives despite repression. The communal fabric of medieval villages and towns also shifts. People gather in new ways, not only for religious festivals, but for discussions about the unfamiliar phenomenon, sharing experiences, and debating implications. This fosters a sense of collective curiosity, but also suspicion, as rumors and misinformation spread. Health and medicine, long reliant on tradition and superstition, begin tentative change. Herbal remedies are scrutinized anew in light of the breakthrough. Some healers experiment with fresh approaches, though many are condemned as witches or charlatans. The tension between old beliefs and emerging knowledge becomes a battleground for control over life and death. Despite these early benefits, warnings go unheeded. Skeptics caution against rapid change, fearing social upheaval and loss of divine favor. Prophets and zealots proclaim that this new power is a test or punishment from God. Fear of the unknown leads to persecution of those who embrace or disseminate the new knowledge, causing conflicts that sometimes erupt into violence. For you, living through this period means navigating a world where hope and fear coexist. The promise of progress sits side by side with the threat of chaos. Your daily routines adjust as you encounter new tools or ideas, but the old ways persist stubbornly. Trust becomes a scarce commodity as alliances shift between tradition and innovation. In this fragile balance, the seeds of the future are planted. The benefits of the breakthrough spark admiration and cautious adoption, while its dangers fuel resistance and conflict. The medieval world, once perceived as static, now teeters on the edge of transformation, with its social, economic, and cultural foundations tested as never before. As this delicate dance unfolds, it foreshadows profound changes that will ripple through the centuries. The Middle Ages, poised between darkness and dawn, reveal their capacity for both resilience and reinvention, a testament to human adaptability amid uncertainty. As years pass, after the initial shockwave of new knowledge or technology, the medieval world begins to undergo transformations that reach far beyond immediate adaptations. What seemed at first like isolated shifts in trade, craft, or belief slowly ripple through the environment, health, geopolitics, and the very consciousness of people. The long-term consequences of this breakthrough unsettle the centuries-old structures of medieval life and lay the groundwork for a profound metamorphosis. Environmentally, the adoption of improved agricultural techniques inspired by the newfound knowledge alters the relationship between humans and the land. Crop yields increase thanks to better tools and crop rotation, but intensified farming also leads to soil exhaustion in some areas. Forests are cleared more aggressively to accommodate expanding farmland, impacting ecosystems and wildlife. The delicate balance medieval people had with nature begins to tilt toward human dominance, setting in motion early forms of environmental change. Health and medicine, once largely confined to superstition and rudimentary practices, see slow but crucial progress. The dissemination of scientific ideas challenges traditional treatments, encouraging more empirical observation of symptoms and remedies. Epidemics, which had decimated populations regularly, begin to be better understood, though still far from controlled. Life expectancy gradually improves for some, but widespread poverty and disease persist, highlighting the unevenness of change. Geopolitically, the infusion of new knowledge destabilizes old power dynamics. Feudal lords who adapt and leverage innovations consolidate power, strengthening their domains. Conversely, those clinging rigidly to tradition risk losing influence. Emerging city-states and merchant classes exploit growing trade networks, challenging aristocratic and ecclesiastical dominance. This sets the stage for conflicts and realignments that will reshape political borders and social hierarchies over generations. The rigid social order begins to show cracks as education spreads beyond monastic walls. Literacy rises among merchants, artisans, and even some peasants, empowering groups previously excluded from political and intellectual life. The growing middle class, burgeoning townspeople, traders, and professionals begins to assert new social roles. This gradual shift threatens the old division between nobility, clergy, and peasantry, planting seeds for future revolutions. Culturally and spiritually, the impact is profound yet conflicted. As scientific ideas challenge church doctrines, religious institutions face internal divisions. Some clergy embrace reform and dialogue, while others double down on orthodoxy, condemning dissenters as heretics. This tension fuels both the growth of humanist thought and the rise of persecution, creating a volatile intellectual climate. People's consciousness also transforms. Exposure to new ideas kindles curiosity and skepticism, encouraging questioning of established truths. Concepts of individualism, agency, and progress begin to take root, even if often suppressed. The medieval worldview, once focused on divine predestination and rigid hierarchy, starts to make room for human potential and secular knowledge. However, these long-term consequences are not without unforeseen dangers. Increased trade and movement introduce new diseases, sometimes devastating populations unprepared for them. Social upheavals spark rebellions as oppressed groups seize opportunities created by shifting power. Environmental degradation, while gradual, starts to threaten traditional ways of life. You, living through these decades, would witness the unfolding of a world in transition. The certainties of your youth give way to ambiguity and change. Your role, whether as a peasant, artisan, or noble, would be redefined as the old world recedes and a new order struggles to emerge. This era's legacy is a paradox. It is both a time of upheaval and continuity, of destruction and creation. The medieval world's long-term evolution sets humanity on a path toward modernity, even as it grapples with the shadows of its past. By understanding these far-reaching effects, we see how a single breakthrough can echo through centuries, shaping the environment we live in, the societies we build, and the minds we nurture. The Middle Ages, often viewed narrowly as a static age of darkness, reveal themselves as a dynamic period where human resilience and innovation laid the foundations for the future. From this vantage point, the medieval era becomes more than history. It becomes a mirror reflecting humanity's enduring capacity to adapt, transform, and strive amid uncertainty. To truly grasp the profound shifts unfolding in the Middle Ages, we must pause and explore the scientific ideas and natural laws that, while still mysterious to medieval minds, were beginning to emerge and take shape beneath the surface of tradition and faith. The period was a crossroads where ancient knowledge met nascent inquiry, and the mechanisms of nature slowly revealed themselves through observation, experimentation, and cautious theorizing. At the core of medieval science was a legacy inherited from the Greeks and Romans: Aristotle's philosophy, Ptolemy's astronomy, and Galen's medicine. These classical authorities provided frameworks that dominated European thought, blending reason with teleology, the idea that everything has a purpose ordained by a divine creator. While these concepts constrained some inquiry, they also offered a structured way to interpret natural phenomena. One fundamental principle shaping medieval understanding was the concept of gravity, albeit in an embryonic form. Unlike the Newtonian physics that would come centuries later, medieval scholars conceived gravity more as a natural tendency of objects to seek their natural place. Heavy things, like stones, fell downward because they belonged to the earth, while lighter elements, like air or fire, naturally moved upward. This qualitative view framed the physical world as a hierarchy of elements, each with its rightful place. The mechanics of motion were similarly explained through Aristotle's ideas. A moving object requires a constant force to keep it going, and rest is the natural state. This theory went largely unchallenged until later scientific revolutions. However, medieval thinkers like Jean Buridan began to question these assumptions, proposing the concept of impetus, a precursor to inertia, suggesting that motion could persist without continuous force, an early crack in the prevailing worldview. Astronomy in the Middle Ages was a blend of observation and complex models. The geocentric system placed Earth at the center of the universe, with planets and stars embedded in concentric spheres. This model, based on Ptolemy's Almagest, was accepted by both scientists and the Church. Yet, careful astronomical observations, often motivated by calendrical and navigational needs, gradually exposed discrepancies, paving the way for future heliocentric ideas. In medicine, the humoral theory dominated. Health was thought to depend on the balance of four bodily fluids: blood, phlegm, black bile, and yellow bile. Treatments aimed to restore equilibrium through bloodletting, diet, and herbal remedies. While misguided by modern standards, this system represented an earnest attempt to explain disease and maintain health with the tools available. Meanwhile, innovations in engineering and craftsmanship reflected practical applications of scientific principles, even if not fully understood theoretically. Watermills and windmills harnessed energy to grind grain and pump water. Medieval clocks measured time mechanically, and the development of eyeglasses improved vision, each a testament to the era's inventive spirit. Behind these developments lay an emerging spirit of inquiry. Medieval scholars translated and studied Arabic scientific texts, which themselves preserved and advanced Greek knowledge. Figures such as Roger Bacon advocated empirical methods and experimentation, anticipating the scientific method. Universities became hubs where natural philosophy was debated and refined. This interplay between tradition and innovation, faith and reason, defines the medieval scientific landscape. The universe was seen as a coherent whole, created by God but accessible through human intellect. This belief underpinned both reverence for ancient authorities and a cautious optimism that nature's secrets could be uncovered. The sudden arrival of new knowledge or technology, as imagined earlier, would have challenged these frameworks. It would force medieval minds to reconsider the nature of matter, motion, and life itself. For example, understanding gravity not just as a natural place, but as a force measurable and universal would revolutionize physics. Comprehending biology at the molecular level would upend humoral medicine. Recognizing that the Earth orbits the Sun would dismantle centuries of cosmological thought. For a medieval person, these shifts would be staggering, akin to moving from a world of fixed certainties to one of dynamic, testable truths. It is a journey from myth and dogma toward observation and reason, a transition that took centuries and reshaped humanity's place in the cosmos. In your imagined life during this era, you would be a witness to the slow unfolding of these scientific revelations. Perhaps you'd be a curious monk copying manuscripts by candlelight, or a merchant learning about celestial charts to navigate distant seas. Whatever your role, you'd sense the tension between the old explanations and the tantalizing promise of new understanding. This scientific awakening forms the invisible engine driving the medieval transformation. It's a reminder that progress often begins quietly, beneath layers of resistance, only to emerge as a powerful force reshaping society and history. As the waves of change ripple ever deeper into medieval society, a mounting tension builds beneath the surface, setting the stage for a crisis of unprecedented scale. What began as cautious curiosity and tentative adaptation soon morphs into a storm of social upheaval, environmental strain, and existential uncertainty. The very foundations of medieval life, political structures, social orders, and natural balance, are pushed to their breaking points. One of the most immediate catalysts for this crisis is the destabilization of traditional power. Feudal lords, whose authority depended on rigid hierarchies and land control, find their influence challenged not only by emerging merchant classes, but also by new knowledge that empowers commoners. As literacy spreads and education expands beyond monasteries, peasants and townsfolk begin to question their place in the order. Rebellions ignite, fueled by economic grievances, class tensions, and a growing sense of injustice. These social upheavals are not isolated incidents, but widespread movements that shake kingdoms and city-states alike. The Jacquerie in France, the Peasants' Revolt in England, and other uprisings reflect a medieval world grappling with profound change. The old order, reliant on unquestioned loyalty and divine right, fractures under the pressure of demands for rights, fairer treatment, and representation. At the same time, environmental challenges exacerbate the crisis. Years of intensified agriculture and deforestation begin to take their toll. Soil depletion reduces crop yields in some regions, while unpredictable weather, partly natural, partly influenced by longer-term climate cycles, brings famines and food shortages. Starvation weakens populations, making them more vulnerable to disease and social unrest. Indeed, disease plays a tragic role in this tumultuous era. The infamous Black Death sweeps through Europe, killing an estimated one-third of the population. This catastrophe shatters communities, disrupts economies, and accelerates social transformation. Labor shortages empower surviving peasants to demand better conditions, further undermining feudal bonds. The trauma of plague alters religious beliefs and cultural expressions, sometimes fueling apocalyptic fears and scapegoating. Political instability follows. Kings and nobles vie for control amid shifting alliances, wars erupt over weakened claims, and centralized authority struggles to reassert itself. The Church, once a unifying force, faces crises of confidence as its inability to protect against plague and social chaos leads to skepticism and calls for reform. This spiritual turmoil foreshadows later religious upheavals. In this cauldron of crisis, technological and intellectual advances both suffer setbacks and find new impetus. Persecution of heretics and scholars accused of witchcraft slows progress in some areas, yet others push forward, spurred by the urgent need to solve practical problems of survival and governance. Innovations in medicine, military technology, and governance arise from necessity, reshaping medieval life. For the individual living through this crisis, whether a peasant struggling to feed family, a merchant navigating volatile markets, or a cleric questioning faith, the world becomes unpredictable and dangerous. Daily existence is marked by uncertainty, fear, but also resilience. Communities band together for protection and mutual aid, even as distrust and violence simmer. This great crisis is a crucible, testing the limits of medieval society's endurance and adaptability. It reveals the fragility of established systems when confronted with profound change, whether social, environmental, or intellectual. Yet within this chaos lies the potential for renewal. The medieval world, though shaken to its core, begins to transform into something new, an era where old certainties give way to nascent modernity. The collapse of old structures makes space for innovation, new political ideas, and social contracts that will shape the coming centuries. Living in this period means witnessing not only loss and suffering, but also the birth of a new consciousness. It is a moment of reckoning where humanity's capacity to survive is tested, and the choices made will echo far into the future. From this upheaval, history's narrative pivots. The Middle Ages emerge from the shadows not as a static, dark period, but as a dynamic, painful, and ultimately creative era, a bridge from tradition to transformation. In the wake of the great crisis that shakes the foundations of medieval society, humanity finds itself at a crossroads. The upheaval compels people to confront challenges, not only with resilience, but also with creativity and daring solutions. This period becomes a testament to human adaptability, a time when survival depends on bold experimentation and the willingness to rethink old assumptions. One of the most remarkable responses is the gradual restructuring of social and political systems. The rigid feudal hierarchies, strained by rebellion and economic shifts, begin to give way to more flexible arrangements. Towns and cities gain greater autonomy, as burgeoning merchant classes demand rights and representation. Guilds evolve from strictly craft organizations to influential political entities, mediating between rulers and commoners. The rise of early parliamentary institutions signals a profound transformation in governance. Monarchs, pressured by nobles and citizens alike, start to share power through councils and assemblies. These changes sow seeds for modern democracy, introducing concepts of negotiation, consent, and accountability that contrast sharply with earlier absolute rule. Parallel to political shifts, economic innovation accelerates. Trade networks expand beyond Europe, linking Mediterranean, Middle Eastern, and Asian markets more tightly. The influx of goods, such as spices, silk, and precious metals, fuels wealth and curiosity. Banking and credit systems develop, facilitating investment and commercial growth. Technological advances, born out of necessity, also flourish. Improved shipbuilding and navigation techniques open the seas to exploration, setting the stage for the age of discovery. Mechanical clocks refine timekeeping, enabling more precise scheduling vital for commerce and urban life. Advances in agriculture, including the spread of the heavy plow and harnessing of water and wind power, increase productivity and support growing populations. Intellectually, this era sees the flowering of the Renaissance of the 12th and 13th centuries, a revival of classical learning combined with new philosophical inquiries. Universities become vibrant centers where scholars debate theology, natural philosophy, and law. The translation of Arabic and Greek texts into Latin exposes Europeans to advanced mathematics, astronomy, and medicine, broadening horizons. Religious institutions, while still powerful, face increasing calls for reform. The tensions exposed by crisis fuel movements questioning clerical authority and corruption, foreshadowing later religious transformations. Meanwhile, humanist thinkers emphasize individual potential and critical inquiry, planting seeds for secularism. Amid these sweeping changes, ordinary people adapt their daily lives. Farmers adopt crop rotation and improve tools. Artisans refine their crafts with new techniques. Merchants organize to navigate expanding markets. Communities develop institutions like hospitals and almshouses, reflecting growing concern for social welfare. Yet, these responses are not without conflict. Resistance persists from those invested in maintaining old orders. Political intrigue, religious persecution, and social strife continue to challenge progress. Nonetheless, the momentum of change proves inexorable. For you, living in this time means engaging with a world in flux, where tradition and innovation coexist uneasily, but where hope and possibility abound. You might find yourself a merchant navigating new trade routes, a scholar uncovering ancient manuscripts, or a townsfolk participating in civic life's nascent forms. This era highlights humanity's remarkable capacity to transform crisis into opportunity. The medieval world, battered by disaster and upheaval, becomes a laboratory of experimentation, political, technological, and cultural, that shapes the trajectory toward modernity. In this crucible of adaptation, the foundations of the contemporary world are forged. Concepts of rights, governance, science, and human dignity begin to crystallize, offering a roadmap out of the medieval past and into a future defined by innovation and progress. As these transformations unfold, they invite us to reflect on the resilience and ingenuity embedded in human nature, qualities that have allowed civilizations to rise from ashes time and again, even in the face of overwhelming adversity. As the medieval world emerges from centuries of upheaval and transformation, a new future begins to take shape, one that bridges the ancient past with the possibilities of modernity. The lessons learned from crisis, adaptation, and innovation lay the foundation for societies that are more complex, interconnected, and dynamic than ever before. Cities flourish as hubs of commerce, culture, and political power. What were once small, fortified towns grow into bustling centers with markets, guild halls, universities, and cathedrals that symbolize both spiritual aspiration and civic pride. The urban population swells, drawing peasants, artisans, and merchants seeking opportunity and community beyond rural confines. Governance evolves to reflect these changes. Monarchies adapt by incorporating representative bodies, while nascent republics and city-states experiment with forms of self-rule. Laws become codified, justice more standardized, and the concept of citizenship begins to gain meaning. The delicate balance between authority and freedom becomes a defining feature of this new era. Trade networks span continents, connecting Europe with Africa, Asia, and the Middle East. The flow of goods, ideas, and technologies accelerates, enriching societies and fostering cross-cultural exchanges. Maritime innovations enable explorers to venture beyond known horizons, setting the stage for global interactions that will reshape world history. Education and intellectual life blossom. Universities become centers not only for theology, but also for science, philosophy, and the arts. The Renaissance awakens a spirit of inquiry and humanism that challenges old dogmas and celebrates human creativity and potential. Printing presses spread knowledge rapidly, democratizing information and fueling debates. Social structures become more fluid. The rigid hierarchies of feudalism give way to more complex stratifications where wealth, education, and occupation influence status. The rise of a vibrant middle class shifts economic and cultural power. Women, while still limited by many social constraints, begin to find new roles in commerce, the arts, and intellectual life. Religious life remains central, but increasingly diverse. Movements for reform question institutional authority, leading to religious pluralism and the eventual emergence of new faith traditions. The relationship between church and state is renegotiated, with secular governance gaining prominence. Environmental awareness, while nascent, grows in response to centuries of human impact. Agricultural innovations continue, yet challenges such as deforestation and soil depletion prompt early conservation efforts and shifts toward more sustainable practices. For an individual living in this transformed world, the opportunities and challenges are profound. Education and mobility open doors that were once closed. The very idea of personal agency and future possibilities expands beyond what medieval ancestors could imagine. Yet, this dawn is not without shadows. Conflicts over power, religion, and resources persist, reminding us that progress is neither linear nor inevitable. The struggles of this era reflect the ongoing human quest to balance tradition and change, security and freedom, faith and reason. This new future stands as a testament to the resilience and creativity of humanity. It shows how centuries of darkness and turmoil can give way to light and growth when curiosity, courage, and collaboration prevail. Looking back, the Middle Ages reveal themselves not as a simple period of decline, but as a complex crucible where old and new collided, forging pathways that continue to shape our world today. As we consider this transformative journey, we are invited to reflect on the cycles of history, how eras of hardship and renewal are intertwined, and how our own time might echo these timeless patterns. As our journey through the Middle Ages draws to a close, it's worth pausing to reflect on what this remarkable period reveals about humanity and what lessons we might draw from imagining ourselves living in such a vastly different world. The Middle Ages were a time of contradictions, a world where darkness and light, despair and hope, stagnation and innovation coexisted in a complex dance. Living through those centuries, you would have faced daily challenges unimaginable to most of us today. Harsh labor, limited medicine, strict social hierarchies, and uncertainty that hung over every aspect of life. Yet, within this environment, people found ways to endure, to build communities, to create art, to seek knowledge, and to hope for something better. One of the key takeaways is the resilience of human nature. Despite harsh conditions and profound upheavals, people adapted and innovated. They forged institutions, feudal, religious, academic, that structured society and provided meaning. They balanced the familiar and the new, preserving traditions while cautiously embracing change. Another important lesson lies in the power of knowledge and curiosity. The medieval world reminds us that progress is often slow and nonlinear, emerging from the interplay between faith, tradition, and reason. The sparks of scientific inquiry and philosophical thought that took root then eventually led to revolutions in how we understand ourselves and the universe. Moreover, the Middle Ages illustrate the consequences of social and environmental imbalance. Rigid hierarchies and inequality bred conflict and unrest, while intensified human impact on the environment foreshadowed challenges still relevant today. These historical patterns remind us of the importance of justice, equity, and stewardship in building sustainable societies. Imagining life in this era also invites us to appreciate modern conveniences and rights often taken for granted. Access to education, healthcare, technological comforts, and political freedoms. It challenges us to consider how far humanity has come and how fragile progress can be. Finally, this exploration encourages humility and empathy. By stepping into the shoes of medieval people, we gain perspective on the universality of human experience, the desires to survive, to belong, to understand, and to improve one's condition despite adversity. As we face our own era's complex challenges, from climate change to social upheaval to rapid technological shifts, the Middle Ages serve as both a warning and an inspiration. They show us the costs of resistance to necessary change and the transformative potential when courage and creativity rise in response. So, what if you lived during the Middle Ages? You would be part of a world vastly different from today, yet connected by the same enduring human spirit. You would witness the struggles and triumphs that laid the foundations of the modern world, experiencing firsthand the tension between old and new, certainty and uncertainty. This reflection leaves us with a question that transcends time. How will we respond to the challenges and opportunities of our own era? Will we embrace curiosity, resilience, and compassion as those before us did? Or will we falter under the weight of fear and resistance? The Middle Ages, once dismissed as a dark time, emerge as a profound chapter in humanity's story, a reminder that even in the most difficult periods, seeds of transformation and hope endure. And that perhaps is the greatest lesson of all. Thank you for joining this journey back in time to the Middle Ages, a world so distant from ours, yet deeply connected by the threads of human experience. As we reflect on the struggles, innovations, and transformations of that era, we are reminded that history is not just a series of dates or events, but a living story shaped by resilience, curiosity, and the courage to face the unknown. If this exploration made you think differently about the past, or even your own place in the unfolding story of humanity, please like, share, and subscribe. And let us know in the comments. If you could live in any era, Would you choose the Middle Ages or somewhere else entirely? Until next time, stay curious, stay inspired, and remember, the future is built on the lessons of the past.